Morning, everybody. This is the August 23rd, 2022 meeting of the Dunn County Planning Resource and Development Committee. Looks like everyone from the committee is here, so we have a quorum. Approval of the minutes from the August 9th meeting. Do I have a motion? Supervisor Burke, Supervisor Moorhead seconds. Any questions, suggestions, or corrections? Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Motion carries. We don't have a public hearing. Well, we have some public comments, so we have some written comments, and Chase, I think, will read those, right?
Morning, everyone. We have three written comments that were received prior to the meeting. The first one is from Tina Lee. She apologized. She forgot to give her address in her comments, and she resides at E4588 453rd Avenue in Menominee. And her comments are as follows. Dear Planning Resource and Development members, my name is Tina Lee, and I am a professor of anthropology at UW Stout. I am also one of the co-directors of the Lakes REU. The Lakes program is funded by the National Science Foundation and brings students from across the country to study nutrient pollution in our local watershed from an interdisciplinary perspective. The program just completed its 7th summer. Although I do not live on Lake Tainter and would not be affected directly by the proposed lake district, I do have some thoughts about that and I hope are helpful. I'm an applied anthropologist by training and have spent my career understanding policy, how local actors implement policy, and what factors contribute to effective policy. I've spent the last several years learning about the dynamics of nutrient pollution in our watershed from experts on the topic. I have also spent time observing and talking to a variety of people who are actively taking steps to address the issue. More specifically, my students and I have conducted multiple interviews with officials from the DNR, NRCS, Natural Resources Conservation Service, Dunn County Land and Water Conservation Division, the Dunn County Board, and the City of Menominee. We have also talked to scientists, farmers, local environmental activists, lakeshore homeowners, and citizens actively engaged in trying to improve water quality. We have observed many meetings and a multitude of efforts to address this issue. We have become well-versed in policies that try to address the problem, in the complexity of the issue, and in expert opinions about the dynamics of the problem and how to address it. It is from this perspective that I write to you today. Please note that these are my thoughts alone. I do not represent the University of Wisconsin Stout in any way, and I am not speaking for any of my colleagues. In doing research about water pollution, I am struck by the profound complexity and large scope of the issue. In talking with scientists and other experts, it is clear that the majority opinion is that there is no single magic bullet that will solve the problem and that positive changes will not be quick or easy. It is also clear that the condition of our lakes is profoundly connected to the larger watershed and all the land within it, since they are, after all, actually impoundments created by damming a river system. Actions taken in one impoundment are thus unlikely to have a large impact given that nutrient-rich waters enters on a continuous basis. Given the complexity of the issue, a variety of approaches will need to be taken and more landowners will need to be involved. Efforts will, in short, need to be taken at a watershed level. In the abstract, a lake district can provide a mechanism by which citizens can contribute to improving water quality through financing projects, through taxes and assessments, volunteering, and learning more about how they can take actions that can have a positive impact, such as changing how they use their own land, supporting local farmers who use sustainable practices, etc. However, I am not convinced that this particular district will be as effective as hoped. First, I think that this proposal to form a lake district was presented to lakeshore homeowners in a way that did not provide them with all the information needed to provide an informed decision. I am well versed in lake districts, what they do and how they work. In reading the materials presented to the homeowners, I thought that key details were presented in ways that did not clearly and concisely tell homeowners how a district would function or what potential solutions would be attempted by a district and what they might cost. For example, lake districts usually tax or assess landowners since most projects are costly and grants are often too small to provide enough funds. This was not made clear. Some examples of projects that might be considered and their costs would be important pieces of information for homeowners to know, but they were not included. I attended the public hearing about the proposed district on August 9th. and many who spoke or provided comments felt similarly that information to make an informed decision wasn't provided. I do not think anyone intended to deceive anyone, but I do think the lack of information is an issue. Would that same number of people have signed if the information was presented differently and more comprehensively? I suspect the answer to this is no. Will people trust and work with a district going forward? I'm not sure, but it is an important open question. Trust will be important to make a district a truly democratic institution where people feel they have a voice. I'm also concerned about how any proposed district would interact with key government agencies and other efforts currently underway to address water quality issues in our water bodies. I've observed efforts to work towards better water quality for years now as a researcher, and we have started to see these efforts make a positive impact. In my observations, I have seen a large split between the leaders of this effort and others working to improve things. I have to assume that those who worked so hard to get signatures to bring this Lake District proposal forward, a commendable effort for sure, would serve as leaders for a district if one were to be created. I further assume that they have ideas about what they would like to do that they will push for a variety of reasons that are not the fault of one side or the other alone. The various efforts made by the Friends of the Red Cedar to date and those made by other entities have remained separate. It is thus not clear to me that a district would take actions in coordination with other efforts. This lack of coordination would likely limit the potential positive impacts of money contributed by Tainter Lake residents, contributing to the frustration felt by many about the state of the water near their homes. This frustration might lead to continued disengagement with the issue. This is an outcome to be avoided. In addition, given what I have learned from experts, any efforts concentrated only in one impoundment, one that is really part of a river system, are likely to have limited benefits unless changes are also made on a watershed-wide level. Coordination across the watershed is needed. According to most experts I have talked to, I am concerned that this lake district would operate in an isolated fashion that would have, at best, a more limited impact than hoped for, but potentially no positive impact. I am excited to see concerned citizens taking actions to create something to address an issue that we all recognize, and I commend their efforts. However, I'm not convinced that this particular district proposal and potential district is set up in a way that will allow it to succeed. Sincerely, Tina Lee. The next comment is from Arthur Nealand. Dear Dunn County Board PR&D Committee, I have read the proposal for a lakes district on Tainter Lake, and although I think a lake district could be beneficial in many ways, I believe the current proposal has not taken many extremely important factors into account. The district would allow fees to be levied upon residents, some of whom may be able to afford it, but what research or safeguards have been put in place to ensure that those who are on fixed incomes are not put through an undue burden to pay extra fees they cannot meet? The proposal should read much more like a business plan, outlining details and using research to support its implementation. The plans at this point seem nebulous. Biomanipulation is extremely complex, and detailed timelines are required for successful implementation. Has a detailed budget, including taking into account potential currently unseen costs, been created and reviewed by those who have undertaken this kind of project before? These large, complex projects, in my professional experience, require a dedicated staff person to attend the myriad of project needs that must be attended to. Vague but hopeful plans will not lead to a successful project. As any of you who have business experience will know, careful planning, referring to and taking note from similar projects, and market research are ways to ensure that a plan with great potential has the greatest chance for real and lasting success. To ensure community support and investment, people will want to see a well thought out, detailed plan, most especially when it could end up costing them extra fees. It is not right to assume that everyone can afford them, and consideration for all who call their area home should be afforded. We all have a common goal to create a healthier lake, and this plan is on its way, but not yet complete. I cannot put my support behind this project until it has a clear and achievable plan that takes into consideration the very real responsibilities and power this association will have, and explicitly outlines how it will wield that power. Sincerely, Arthur Nealand. The last one we received from Amber Kirsting. Dear Dunn County Planning Research and Development Committee, Thank you for taking the time to wade through the complexities involved with this petition to establish a lake district. I respect the efforts to rally the community around the lake, and I have great appreciation for the enthusiasm displayed, but the current proposal to establish a Tainter Lake district leaves me with grave concerns. I have highlighted several of those concerns below. 1, management of finances. The proposed plan is vague, and the scale of the projects up for consideration is downplayed. It requires a specialized skill set to not only levy taxes appropriately and or be competitive in seeking grant funding, but to make sure that projects are executed in a timely fashion, within budget and properly insured, getting bids and using local labor and supplies. It demands expertise to know who is on the line if things go wrong and the Lake District accrues debt or gets sued for something unexpected. This is not a bake sale level of funding. This is a type that impacts a demographic that already has limited resources. Average property values include a whole lot of people. Myself, my neighbors, were often struggling financially. Without some transparency about what the numbers could actually look like, I am troubled that support for this plan may be based on misleading or missing information. 2, simple solutions for complicated problems. There is always danger in claiming a single expert on a topic. While progress may be frustratingly slow, current efforts to reduce nutrient input are data-based and are making a measurable difference over time. Some of the bioremediation efforts proposed may have seen promising results, but are untested in systems like Tainter Lake, a eutrophic impoundment at the bottom of a large watershed with years of legacy phosphorus in play. There are complex interactions in these ecosystems, and it is irresponsible to not use all of the knowledge at hand from the many entities and individuals who have been working on local water quality for years. 3, representation. I have not heard about protections in place to make sure that this is truly a democratic body with representative representation. I am disturbed by the idea that the voices that will be heard at meetings are the ones who will be able to show up, not single parents without childcare, not older residents with limited mobility, not families who have had a lake cabin for 3 generations but aren't on the lake full time. Those opinions should matter. And there needs to be a plan laid out to make sure that they are a part of the discussions that involve their home. I am raising my family on the banks of Tainter Lake, and I have been involved in efforts to improve water quality in the Red Cedar watershed in numerous capacities. I am deeply invested in our shared water resources and have demonstrated that with time and energy over years, not merely by signing a petition based on the promise of doing something. I want to make sure that we use our limited resources to do the right things for our land and water, our communities, and the generations to come. With so many unclear components, I am not comfortable handing over power to create a governing body vague in structure and method. I cannot support this iteration of a Lake District proposal. Thank you again for your time and consideration. Respectfully, Amber Kirsting. That concludes the comments.
Great. Thank you, Chase. Wow, very thoughtful letters. Again, we don't have a public hearing today. But before we go on with the agenda, I'm wondering if, since we have some folks here to potentially comment on the variance request, in consideration of their time, would the committee be okay with moving item 8 up to ahead of after item 6? Without objection, then that's what we'll do. Then number 6 is summer intern report. And Calvin D is going to, you have the floor, Calvin.
All right, so I'll be talking to you guys about kind of my experience with Dunn County, some things I learned and ways that I helped out. Start off, my background had nothing to do with farming. I kind of grew up in the city, so I definitely did a lot of learning around farming practices, general farming knowledge and such. Dunn County helped me out with that, and same with the NRCS. This internship, I was very glad that I was able to work with a lot of organizations and see how watershed planning happens with many organizations in part to fix a common goal. Some things that I've done this summer and ways that I helped out were helping out on the county's transect survey, identifying crops, and accounting for different crops in different areas. Going on CAFO visits, learning what a CAFO is, and how nutrients are managed on that site. One of my main goals this summer was to obtain 180 hours of GIS work. And I did that by updating manure storage pit activity. That was one task that Travis Dreyer helped me start out with a goal for this internship. That was one thing he would like to update, and I successfully helped him with that, as well as created a work path for other either interns or other people updating that manure storage. So if they had no previous knowledge of that, they could go into the Word document that I created and work off from what I've left there. I've also created an internship log of other things that I've done throughout this internship. So if other interns would like to look back on that and see things I've learned or kind of just learn from my experience, I'll be leaving that behind as well. But besides helping out the county through my work with GIS and other things, the county has definitely helped me out with some valuable experience. Most notably, I guess one of my highlights of the internship was going on a St. Croix County conservation tour and learning about different practices through that way. And this county has definitely helped me with some education about conservation. And I think that's pretty valuable for passing down and helping me with my work once I graduate. And coming into this internship, I didn't really know what kind of job I would like to have. I like to keep my major broad, and this internship, although it did help me in certain ways, I think I definitely would like to go into a conservation related job, and this internship helped me determine that. So I'd like to thank everyone that made that possible.
Yes.
I got a couple comments, sure. So just a reminder, the internship is funded through the Dunn County Alliance of Conservation and Sports Clubs. So a number of different entities contribute funding to it. So there isn't really a financial cost to the county and our budget for the internship, but we certainly get the benefit of having an intern work on projects and able to give that intern, such as Calvin, an experience that maybe they wouldn't normally get in an internship, a variety of different things. The main project that he worked on and the outcomes of that is important for us, particularly related to the manure storage ordinance and how we can implement primarily the abandonment and management of existing manure storage facilities. So the original manure storage ordinance was adopted in 2000, and there are a number of manure storage structures that are out there that predated the ordinance. Using GIS skills, Calvin was able to determine where some of these structures might be, create an inventory, and then we can go out and ground truth them and work with landowners to either properly abandon them or review them to make sure they're being managed and operated properly. So that was something that was kind of lacking that our staff identified, and he certainly was able to get us in the right direction for that. So we saw a benefit of having Calvin here for the summer. Sounds like he got some benefit of being here as well. So I would consider that a success. So thanks, Calvin.
Do any committee members have questions or comments? Great. Thanks a lot, Kevin. Appreciate it. Let's see. This next item was requested on our agenda, the No, let's go to consideration of actions taken by the Planning and Resource Development Committee. Variance request in the town of Menominee to create a certified survey map lot with substandard and access easement. Tom, you want to take care of this?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, everyone. So what we have in front of us this morning is a variance request. The petitioner is Colton Amundson, and he's actually here in the back of the room with his wife and his father-in-law, Mr. Kraft, who owns the property. Location, so we're in, it's part of Government Lot 5 of Section 15, Town of Menominee. The request this morning is to create a new lot, a certified survey map lot that'll be served by an access easement that doesn't meet the minimum required width of 66 feet per section 16.43 sub 3A of our county land division ordinance. So a little background, Colton is looking at purchasing approximately 2 acres of property from his wife's parents. Get on page, I'm going to be jumping around between slides here, so I apologize. So here's an overview of the property. His in-laws are the Crafts. So they own Government Lot 5, which is this parcel right here down to the river, except for a small little piece in here that's owned by somebody different. There's actually a certified survey map on that little piece. And then the Crafts also own part of Government Lot 6, which is down here, except for there's a meets and bounds description in here that's owned by somebody else. So in total, they have 74 acres there. The property is currently zoned general agriculture. So this is the parcel that they're looking at creating. Everybody can see that on the screen here. So it's roughly a 2-acre parcel. It's going to be situated in here. It hasn't, of course, been surveyed yet. They're waiting on the committee to take action on the variance request. If the request doesn't get approved, then of course there's no reason to go ahead with the survey. So this is approximately where it's going to be, roughly 2 acres. There's going to be an access easement coming in to that. So the public road, if you can see up here on the screen, ends right here, 410th. Is it Avenue or Street? Avenue, 410th Avenue. Thank you. Ends right here. So they are going to have to run an easement in to serve this lot. Of course, it doesn't have frontage on a public highway. So prior to the Crafts owning this, their predecessor in title was a Mr. Dan Newhall. At one time, he owned all of Government Lot 5. In July of 1992, Mr. Newhall created a 2.07 acre parcel in the northeast corner, which is right here. Hopefully everybody can see these yellow lines on here. Let me scroll down. I have a copy of the survey map that was done in 1992. So this little piece was parceled off. And according to this map, you can see it was listed as Oak Lane back then. It's since been given an avenue designation, but Oak Lane, according to the survey map, ends right at the northeast corner of section 15. A strip of land, as you can see on here, was left immediately north of this certified survey map. There's a dimension on here of 18 feet. The other end isn't dimensioned. So there's a strip of land in here that I believe was intentionally left at the time. Because remember, Mr. Newhall owned all the rest of this land behind here. And if his intention was to split off 2 acres and he ran it right up to the section line, or this fence line is shown on here, he would effectively, when he deeded that away, would cut off his access. So I believe that strip was left in there. And I'll show some other documents. There's a driveway, existing driveway that's been there, shows up on the 1938 photo. So it's been there for quite some time. So anyway, this parcel was carved out and split off in 1992. Soon after it was recorded, Mr. Newhall conveyed lot 1 to the Crafts. Actually, they own this parcel at one point back in 1992. So then in February of 2002, Mr. Newhall, remember, he owned the rest of the land behind here. So in 1992, the Crafts were deeded this small piece of land that was surveyed out. And then in 2002, Mr. Newhall, who owned the rest of this land behind here, deeded all of that to the Crafts as well. So at one point in time, they owned everything here. So then in May of 2006, the Crafts conveyed the small certified survey map lot, the 2-acre parcel, to the Millers, retaining the owner or the balance of Government Lot 5. And then over time, the Millers conveyed to the Calls, who are the current owner of this 2-acre parcel. So right now Crafts own everything out here except for this 2-acre parcel. And they also own approximately a 18-foot wide strip right north of this parcel. In the driveway, you can see the driveway coming back into the Crafts home. I'm going to attempt to switch over to another PDF and hopefully it works. Okay. This is a 1938 photo, which I think is an important piece of information. It certainly shows how long the driveway was there. And this isn't a fancy map like we have today. There's no parcel lines. Again, it was from 1938, but right here is where the town road would end today. And you can clearly see the driveway coming back in to the farmhouse back here, 1938. So it's been there a long, long time. This isn't something that was just put in 1992. So the creation of the proposed new lot requires the preparation of a certified survey map. Of course, it has to comply with chapter 16 of our land division ordinance. And in that ordinance requires a 66-foot wide access easement. So if this parcel is surveyed out, they are going to have a 66-foot wide easement all the way until they get to this certified survey map. Then they run into a road, into a wall or a roadblock. They can't get 66 feet unless they get some land or get an agreement, an easement granted from the calls, and then they're going to need a piece from the neighbor to the north. They need 66 feet the whole way. That's why they're here today. So a variance may be granted based on undue hardship. The proposed access easement can't meet the 66-foot width requirement. So our ordinance has a provision in there that they can ask this committee for a variance request. So the driveway serving the Craft property, we know has been there for a long, long time. In 1992, a provision was obviously made to retain future ownership of the driveway. That's why that survey map clearly left out a piece of land there, in my opinion. It omitted the existing driveway that Mr. Newhall was using at the time. So Colton has approached the landowner to the north. Let me just go back. So Colton did approach Mr. Green here, the landowner to the north, about acquiring an easement across part of his property. And keep jumping back and forth, so just bear with me here. I keep losing myself in my own report. So he did approach the landowner to the north, and that landowner was not willing to grant an easement across his property. So without that landowner's cooperation, it's not possible to create a 66-foot wide easement that connects to the end of 410th Avenue. I'm going to just go back to my sketch, zoom in here. It's clear to me because I've been working on this for quite some time, but does everybody see what's going on? 410th comes in here. And in order to extend it, we already have 18 feet of it that's owned by the Crafts. They'd need another 15 feet to get half that street, 33 in other words. They'd need 15 feet roughly off the calls. And they'd need a full 33 feet off Mr. Green coming back here so as to not create a jog in the right of way. And without Mr. Green's cooperation, it doesn't certainly pay to go to calls because he needs both of them. So this is really the crux of why we're here this morning. We've got a 66-foot wide easement they're proposing all the way till they hit Call's property, and then there it's going to neck down. I figured this question may come up this morning, so I did some computations. The survey map shows 18 feet here. It doesn't show a width on this end. So what I did is I mapped in the certified survey map, broke down the section, established the section line. Again, this is all strictly computational. I haven't done any field work, nor am I going to or have plans to, but I just wanted to get an idea what this width is here, and it works out to be about 12 feet. So we have a trapezoidal shaped piece in here, if you will. It's not a parallel strip of land. 18 feet on the east end, 12 on the other. So that's some important information I think the committee should be aware of. So again, the easement's going to be narrow coming off 410th and then flaring out to 66 feet. And that's why we're here this morning. Approaching the committee for a variance of that 66-foot width easement. I'm just trying to pick up here where I left off. So if the variance was granted, it would allow the Crafts to create this new parcel. The additional traffic using this driveway would be very minimal, just be Colton and his wife. So based on the existing circumstances outlined above, the existing access easement, is going to be 66 feet for most of it, except for this portion here. So again, I just want to reiterate, the driveway has been there for a long, long time. It seems to be functioning very well, according to Colton. There's been no issues there. The adjoining landowner is not willing to provide access, so that certainly creates a hardship for the applicant. Without an approved variance from the committee, the proposed 2-acre parcel can't be created, okay? So in order to split off a new building parcel, the Crafts would need to create a parcel of at least 20 acres or larger to exempt it from our land division ordinance. Hopefully everybody understands that. So they could create a 21-acre parcel back here and create an easement coming in, and they wouldn't have to come before the committee. But that creates a hardship as well. You know, Colton he doesn't want to purchase 20 acres. He just wants 2 acres for a home. Lopping off a 20-some acre parcel back there is going to potentially chew up some land that's in crop rotation right now, being used for agricultural purposes. So again, they could build back here, but it would have to be on a much larger parcel. So the goal is to create a 2-acre manageable parcel with an access easement coming in. I'm not going to go through all the, we have to weigh the requests against all the intent and purposes of chapter 16. That was in your packet. If there's any questions on those responses from staff, I can certainly answer those.
Questions, Mr. Chairman?
Sure.
The, south of 410th Avenue, it looks like there's a road here. Is that a private road? You go up to 410th and go straight south.
Yep.
Is that a private road or is that a town road?
It's labeled as 410th, but it's for E911 purposes. And I suppose for, the postmaster, but this is I dug out the survey maps here and the corresponding deeds, and this is actually a private road.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, because that was discussed originally. Could an easement be brought in about where my pointer is across the field here? And then we could make it 66. But the Crafts don't have rights to use that. That's somebody else was given rights to use that. So that was discussed
Okay.
initially.
And my other question is, if it's only 12 feet at the west end, can they get like some land from like lot 1 and not at least have more than the 12 foot? Not considering that the other on the north side would not do it.
I mean, that's possible, and I could let Colton speak to that. So what you're saying is maybe make a 33-foot strip across there or something. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's certainly a possibility. I can't speak to that. Mm-hmm. There's no other questions. So I'll just finish up my staff report. The variance request shall not be contrary to the Wisconsin statutes or Wisconsin Administrative Code, and the granting of this variance would not be contrary to statutes or the code. So staff recommendation at this point is the request will secure substantially the purposes and intent of chapter 16. Based on the above analysis and variance requirements, we are recommending approval of the variance request. There's a few more pages in here. Of course, we've already looked at the certified survey map. There's a copy of the application from Colton, and there's a narrative in here as well. That was all in your packet. I don't intend to reread it. So that concludes my report. I can certainly answer any more questions if there are any, and just, remind everyone that the applicant is here if you have any questions for him or his father-in-law, the owner of the property.
Are there any questions by the committee about dealing with the staff report for any additional questions? Tom, the 12-foot driveway, basically, there's no, there's not any health and safety concerns about that in your mind?
Well, I mean, I gotta think if we do nothing, you know, if say we deny this request, I mean, life goes on, the driveway's there. And if
Yeah,
somebody has a heart attack tomorrow, I would sure think the ambulance is gonna get in there.
Yeah.
You know, um, I guess in my mind, the 66-foot width, you may remember when we were going through the initial draft of the land division ordinance, we had toyed around with the idea of making it narrower if they're only doing one lot. And once you exceeded one lot, then let's make it 66. And then at the end of the day, we just decided, let's just make it 66. If we have some rare cases like this, they would have to apply for a variance. We deal with them on a case by case basis. I mean, there's a lot of driveways out in rural areas that are narrow. I mean, they have 10-foot wide gravel driving surface and they work fine. Menards can get in, bring in a load of lumber. If you need your septic pumped, you can get a pumper truck in there to pump it out. I mean, yeah, if you're coming in there with an 18-wheeler with a oversized load, it might be a problem, but how often is that going to happen? And again, I just point to, you know, emergency services, fire. I can't speak for the condition of the driveway, and perhaps, you know, the applicant or the owner can speak to that. I presume it's a gravel driveway. We're not in a floodplain. We're not, you know, I don't see any other factors here. I guess life it's been used since 1938 and probably well before that. So to answer your question, I guess I don't see any big issues with it the way it is, and that's why I'm recommending approval of it. Obviously, if we had 27 lots going in back there, that's going to be a problem. And perhaps the committee would want to place a condition on the variance request that will allow this for this one lot, but no more. I'll just throw that out there for consideration. And actually in Colton's application, he mentioned that, you know, can be one more house back there. We're not going to be introducing that much more traffic. So I don't see a problem with what they're proposing here. It's not ideal. I think we all agree with that. It's, you know, it's a small strip of land. But it's been working fine for years and I have no reason to believe it's going to create a problem going forward. That's my opinion.
Any other questions? Supervisor Kinnear.
As usual, really easy to understand and a good report. So the current owner passes away or sells the land. This easement could be used to develop, how many acres are there in the field?
How many acres well, there's 74 acres total.
Okay, about 7, 8 or 9 lots. At our density that we could have. So if they sold the property and we didn't have anything on there saying only one lot, you could put 6 or 7 lots on there.
Well, this variance request would be just for this. I mean, the committee's taking up this variance request for this one lot. And the owner can't come back a year from now and say, well, we're going to piggyback on the variance request from 2022 and do 4 more lots now. They would
Okay.
have to come back in for another variance request. And at that time, the committee could address it and say, hey, this is not what we had planned. This isn't going to work.
So someone else, they couldn't sell lots and say you can use this easement?
No, this easement will be granted just for this certified survey map.
Okay, thank you.
And actually, the way our ordinance is written, you can serve up to 4 lots with a private road. Once you exceed that, it has to be built to town standards. So yeah, if the applicant or Mr. Kraft came in next year and said, I want to do a 3-lot CSM out here and applied for another variance request to use the same easement, the committee at that time could say, wait a minute, this is not a good idea. We allowed it for 1, but yeah, we're introducing too much traffic. Now this is a concern for safety and
Thank
for
you.
maintenance.
Do the applicants have anything they would like to say? Okay. All right. Any further questions by the committee? Thanks for an excellent report, Tom. Would anyone care to make a motion to approve the variance or not
Aye.
approve it?
I'll make a motion to approve the variance.
Supervisor Kinnear moves, Supervisor Morehouse seconds. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. Variance is approved. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming. So then we'll move up to item 7. So a while back, we agreed to provide for a review of the multifamily development in the zoning on multifamily development in limited and commercial districts. And Anna's been working on it a little bit. This is, I know Mike asked that, and I agree that we sort of have an update on where we're at on this. I know that Town of Menominee is concerned about it, but so I thought I'd put it on here as a discussion item only and ask Ann to give us a little bit of update of where she's at and what she's thinking about what our plan for going forward in this would be, and just give the committee a chance to sort of mull it over a bit before we can even consider any action on it. So, and can you kind of give us your thoughts of where we're at?
All right. So, we had brought this up before, as you said previously. So I've kind of been just looking into it a little bit more, as we discussed last time, that would be the next step, is just do a little research, see what other counties are doing, see what we're allowing and what we're not allowing, and kind of go from there. And then we'll just see if this is something we want to proceed with. So one of the things I found was that non-owner occupied is not mentioned in any of the other counties that surround Dunn County in any of their ordinances. It's actually more of a real estate term traditionally. Basically, it just means that the owner does not occupy the property as their personal residence. So it's usually like investment properties, single family rental homes, multifamily rental homes, vacation rentals, Airbnbs, timeshares, things like that. Right now in our ordinance, non-owner occupied dwellings are included in the limited commercial district and the general commercial district, and they're restricted to 3,000 square feet or less. And that's the single family, not the multifamily. Looking at St. Croix County, they also don't mention the non-owner occupied. They don't really specify that as a category, but they do allow multifamily housing and single family housing in commercial districts, specifically C2. Polk County permits one single family dwelling unit within general commercial, also included in industrial and recreational commercial. Again, no mention of the non-owner occupied specifically. Eau Claire counties include single family dwellings, multifamily, and modular homes in commercial 1 as principal uses. And they also allow multifamily and 2-family dwellings by commercial or by special exception within commercial districts, C2 and C3. They actually specifically mention short-term rentals in their ordinance, which are permitted in commercial districts. Let's see. I guess what it kind of comes down to, at least what I'm seeing, is that our ordinance is unique, and then it mentions that it is a non-owner occupied dwelling, where others do not specify that. So they allow housing in these areas. I think one of the reasons for that is maybe that it's hard to enforce. It's difficult to know whether someone's actually renting the house out or if they're living there. But that's kind of some of the comparison research that I've done. I have a lot more information, but I don't want to get too far ahead of myself. Love to answer any questions if anybody has any.
Yeah, I mean, Ann's gonna be at some point. We asked her to prepare a staff report on this, but this is sort of an update, as we go along, so we can get some clarity about it. Are there any questions or thoughts? All right.
Can I get on my soapbox a little bit?
Yep.
Okay.
Please do.
Thank you, Ann. That's really interesting. That this is a term more in real estate than something else out, because maybe that's where it came from. But last time when I expressed my concerns, I maybe got too detailed, just kind of a general idea what our township did, and I'm assuming the other 9 or so townships that have commercial in there. You know, town of Menominee had focus groups. We were scared because we had to rezone, and we knew that people really get upset sometimes with rezone. So we did that. We had a couple open meetings. It took us almost 2 years, and we got 0 complaints when we were finally done. It was amazing. But my point is that it was zoned the way the people in the town of Menominee wanted it. And I'm assuming that the other 9 townships were the same way. For whatever reasons we did it, whether it's the comp plan or any other reasons, but it was zoned under the 2015 zoning. And it clearly did not have multifamily housing, owner occupied or otherwise in it at that time. And I'm thinking, well, probably the other ones were thinking the same thing when they zoned it. So my hope is eventually, as we go through this, that we can just strike out of this ordinance, rather than go to each township and say, it's gonna take forever, and say, what do you guys think of this before we do it? My suggestion eventually will be just to say, let's take this out, hold a public hearing and see if anybody objects to it, rather than go the long roundabout way, because using this is irreversible. I see that in the town of Menominee right now, the 40 acres or whatever it is gone. It's no longer farmland. And I really push for, and we have local control. I was on this committee when we made this change. So I missed it totally. And I'm sure everybody else did too, and we didn't know about it. So I'm hoping that we can go forward with as least work as possible for the staff to affirm the decisions that were made at the town of Menominee, and I'm assuming the other 8 or 9 that have, and the town of Menominee and the town of Red Cedar have the most of commercial districts of anybody. Town of Menominee the most, I think. So, Ann, thanks for that's interesting, and I hope as we go forward that we can strike this, because we have R3, which allows for multifamily, and if someone wants it, they can just change it to R3. So, thanks, Mr. Chair.
No, thanks. And your thoughts?
I guess my only question is, so we, as a committee, you're saying to me that you do not want to have multifamily housing or non-owner occupied housing or housing at all in commercial districts. Is that correct? Is
I
that
don't
what
think we're
should be
saying
working
that.
on?
I think we're saying that that's a, I don't think we've decided whether as a committee, we want that or not.
Okay.
Clearly, we have one member who wants that.
I guess I'm trying to get to the bottom of like, what is the main concern about having?
Yeah,
these
that's
in
what this discussion is
commercial
intended to
district,
do,
yeah.
is to try and resolve some of these meetings, some of these questions. So
That's a great question.
Yeah.
You know,
what is
what's the concern? Well, the concern is the town of Menominee decided they didn't want it. The citizens of the town of Menominee decided they didn't want it. And it was zoned that way.
What was zoned that way?
It was zoned commercial. And at that time in 2015, there were no, this was added in 2017, this wording.
Okay, just to be clear, what you're saying is that the non-owner occupied wasn't included in commercial in 2015.
Correct.
And then you added it and okay, I
Yeah.
think I understand that.
Yeah.
I thought you were talking about a specific area that was zoned as commercial and I was like,
Oh,
I
no,
don't know where
no,
you're talking
no.
about.
Well, that's great. That's why the discussion. So that's why I really appreciate it, Tom, that you let us talk about this a little bit. But yeah, it was back before and then it got changed.
Is there concerns with conflict with the housing in commercial districts, or is it that you don't want to see multifamily housing, or what is the?
Well, when we zoned it, it was decided that it was to be commercial as the commercial was. And that it did not allow non-owner occupied single and multifamily.
Okay.
And, I could start going into a whole bunch of different reasons, but that's what the township decided. Based on public hearings, well-attended public hearings, focus groups, and individual work. So that's the easiest way to explain it.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah.
may I direct a question to Supervisor Kinnear? In the public hearings and focus groups and testimony in the township, was this the question of housing in commercial districts specifically addressed?
Now, there's a question I cannot answer clearly. I can say that having duplexes was one of the topics that people did not want. In the survey, and when we did our land use plan, we did the survey, did not want duplexes or other rentals. That was a big thing.
Supervisor Kinnear, does the town have any R3 zoning?
I'm trying to remember, there might be something down near Pinewood where it's R3.
Mm.
I'm not sure. Maybe Ann's looking it up right now.
I'm trying. Not very fast right now. There is a really large housing study being done right now, and I know that Chris would know a lot more about that than I would. I've done some interviews with the Regional Planning Commission and spoke with them about this subject actually a little bit. So I do have a lot of things I can talk about. I just want to get a good direction here at this point. I don't think I'm ready to present a staff report, but I definitely want to talk to Chris about this too some more. So that might help us a little bit too, is that the results of that housing study as well.
Well, we know we need housing. The town of Menominee decided they didn't want multifamily housing. That's where I'm coming from.
Okay.
Town of Menominee chose that for a variety of reasons. However, the town of Menominee, the town of Red Cedar, the town of Tanner, and the city of Menominee have been working together for some time to develop kind of a handshake type agreement of what will go where on the boundaries of the city. And you might have that map, I'm not quite sure. Okay, I've been working on that for quite a few years, and I've been involved with that too. And there are areas where the city and the townships have agreed, this is what we'll do. The town gets to say, or the city gets to say. And we also looked at what does the city see for future development? And what does the town see for future development? We tried to coalesce them so that they're the same. So there are areas where the town of Menominee is looking to grow, and there are areas where the town of Menominee is not just R1, looking to grow, but not through this particular avenue of letting it be in commercial.
So one thing to look at, I suppose, is I'm not sure I totally understand. I understand, Supervisor Kinnear, that the town is concerned that they made this zoning change and now they are faced with, and they have one example of being faced with the right to develop in areas where a certain type of development that they didn't expect was going to be there, right? So one question I have, and maybe you can, I don't expect an answer today, but are there ways to modify the ordinance so that some of the concerns that a town like that would have about, in this case, a commercial zoning area, having a developer who intends to put a significant number of multifamily units on there, in seeming contradiction to what the town plan calls for. Is there any way to amend the ordinance so that requires special consideration or?
Yeah, so I mean, we could move it to, say, a special exception where it would need to be approved by the BOA. before they could move forward.
And
with
the
something like
town
that.
would have the ability to voice its opinion about that.
Yeah. Yep, they'd be
So
able to say,
that's-
hey, we don't see that in our town, and
That's not maybe what you want, Supervisor Kinnear, but that might be an option.
Yeah, certainly might be an option. Special exceptions, look at what the town wants, but don't have to take it into account, like zoning, where they have veto power. But yeah, that's something to look at. I agree.
Okay. Any other questions, comments, any other ideas? Uh, It's a matter of, it really is a matter of finding a way to navigate the desires of the town with and not have something in our ordinance that 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 supersedes those desires that they didn't expect. So I suppose that's not really a clear direction forward, but that's, I think, how we're gonna have to proceed on this. I know, Mike, you want to move it as fast as possible because you're concerned about the opportunity or the potential for misdirection that the ordinance offers. But what I think we have to do it a little bit carefully, or quite a bit carefully. So can you take those in and kind of flesh them out a little bit, and then we'll just keep kind of tossing it around until we get clarity about the direction we want to go, and then we'll go there or try to go there.
yeah, I pretty much already have a staff report put together. It just wasn't perfect yet.
Yeah,
So
that's fine.
I can present that really soon, maybe the next meeting.
Whenever you're ready. And if these things can be taken into consideration in that would be great. Okay. So that's takes care of number 8. Then we're on to number 9, the proposed Tainter Lake Rehabilitation District. That's a mouthful. Public hearing report.
All right, you ready?
You go.
So you should have found in your packet an extensive report that primarily Heather in our office structured. I certainly contributed to it, reviewed it. We've had numerous conversations. It seems like that's all we talk about. So so we're trying to put the due diligence into getting these questions answered. Certainly public comments today and other public comments that were received before, both at the public hearing and in writing, raised some important questions. Hopefully we've been able to answer some of them, but a reminder of this is a draft. The intention was to bring a draft to you today, discuss it, look for more guidance from all of you towards us to finalize a report. We would bring that final report back to you at the next committee meeting of September 13th for your decision to move it forward to the full county board or send it back to us and add more things or edit it. So I'm not sure if you all had a chance to read through it all, but we'll just try to highlight a few things in there, specifically some of the questions. But in here it talks about the timeline, what the description of the proposed district is. We felt it was necessary to break down the ownership of property, just to make sure that we understand that, there are impacts to municipalities that would be incorporated as part of this district as well. So some municipal owned land, such as county land, town land, is within the proposed boundaries of the Lake District. Heather did a good job here of describing the summary of the public hearing. We have that existing timeline, which is derived based on statute as to how the county board must act on this as far as the timing goes. So in the end, the final decision has to be made by county board's January decision unless a public or a special meeting would be held. The report includes the percentages of petitioners versus properties with that breakdown that County Clerk Andrew provided. We get into the public comments. Certainly a more detailed verbatim of what was actually said can be found on the YouTube recording. However, we felt it was necessary to try to summarize to some degree what those comments were from the public. I'm going to skip through some of those and just jump down to the questions and concerns. So there were a number of questions raised, like I said, by members of the public that commented, as well as all of you had specific questions. So we'll try to get through those today to provide some answers. Certainly some of this is unclear and we'll need to do more homework on it, but we can talk about those areas as well. Just a reminder, you know, looking at the next steps and looking at the decision that the county board will have to make, that decision basically in statute describes 4 criteria that the decision must be made on. We as staff don't necessarily feel comfortable at this time weighing in on whether each one of those criteria have been met. Certainly the criteria number 1, based on the work that staff has done at the county, we can answer yes, that it appears the number of required petitions have been signed. But items 2, 3, and 4, depending on your perspective, your opinion, can be subject to a number of different ways to answer that. And certainly we can, we can look at what the petitioners had said in their petition as to how they address that. But just a reminder that this is something that all of you are going to have to try to wade through. So if you have suggestions for us or requests of us, we'd be happy to try to work on that. But at this point in time, we didn't feel very comfortable saying yay or nay that this was met. There is an appeal process. The report does talk about the authority that the county board has and the requirement to establish an initial board of commissioners for the Lake District if approved, and what that would look like. And then certainly there's that appeals process that's afforded in the statute as well. So if a aggrieved person does not like the decision of the county board, there's a opportunity and timeline for what that appeal is required to be filed. So just to go through some of the particular questions. So is there a way for property owners within the Lake District to vote at the annual meeting if they're unable to be physically present? The answer is no. Several times within the statute itself, as well as all the guiding documents, it does say that no absentee ballots or proxies are permitted. That seems to be very clear. And I know that was a concern by many, and it was even brought up in, I believe, the comments today about the fact that such a large district, large number of landowners not necessarily being available for an annual meeting. And actually in this case, it also applies to special meetings that the Board of Commissioners may call as well. I've also requested and requiring Heather to interrupt me at any point in time because she certainly has studied this as much and has more experience with it in her career as well. So the next question, does there need to be a quorum of property owners present in order for a Lake District to levy taxes? Nothing that we can see in statute calls for this. There is mention of quorum of the board of directors for certain votes and actions, but there does not appear to need to be a quorum of the district membership. And in fact, in some of the guidance documents here, back to where it talks about annual meetings, special meetings. And it specifically says in the guidance, there is no quorum requirement for the annual meeting, basically referring to the membership. So if members of the district are concerned about the decisions being made or proposed, they need to be at the meeting. And there is plenty of language in statute and in the guidance document about the proper notifications that the Board of Commissioners must provide to the district members in writing certain timelines. So there should be those I guess, sideboards established for some of that. Next question is there any way for Dunn County to limit Lake District spending on certain items, particularly administrative costs? We have not found anything that grants that authority to the county board upon their decision making to approve or deny the proposed district. So those limitations or decisions are to be made by the district members at an annual meeting. The annual meeting is usually critical for a lot of those decision making. So
kind of to that point, a lake district would be viewed as a form, in statute is called a municipal corporation. So you kind of have to think about it like a town. The county can't go in and tell the town of Menominee, well, you can't spend money on administrative costs. That would go over like a lead balloon. Similar sideboards would apply here. So there's not much we can do to limit what they can and can't do if the board decides to go ahead and grant that authority. Once it's given, it can't be altered.
Mr. Chairman. So Chase and Heather, it is possible that once established, this lake district could approve essentially a levy with 3 people out of 900 and whatever, making that decision. I mean, that's like the worst possible scenario, but that is possible.
Yes.
that's correct. Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, a question?
Yes.
Because right now it's basically just 50-50, the way I see it, you know. Would it be possible to have a lake district that could not levy taxes?
No.
You couldn't put that a stipulation on it?
No.
Because then you'd have 100% behind it instead of 50% behind it.
No, that is called a lake association and they don't need our approval for that.
Okay, good idea to me.
A question?
Yeah.
Actually, I have a lot. I'll just start with one.
Yeah.
So the district can be sued, right? Did I get that? And so like, if they get sued for a lot of money, like who's responsible? Like, do the taxpayers just get billed?
Basically.
Say that again.
Yes. To the best of my knowledge, it would be just like if a town or the county were sued, it would come out of their budget and they would have to pay it. I would hazard a guess, an educated guess, that if it is more than they have in their pool, in their accounts, that would fall under the powers to finance and they would have to take out a loan to pay the fine or the payment or what have you.
Yeah, I was gonna say so we'll get into it in a couple of the other questions too, but the discussion about financing, special charges, special assessments, certainly we need to get a little more clarity on a few of those things, but it is clear that a district can be sued. If the district has expenses incurred by that, they have the ability to do special charges, special assessments, and then whether or not, they can obtain the necessary number of funds to account for that or to resolve that, the power to finance is available there too. So that decision can be made at an annual meeting. And then there is technically through power to finance, no limit on that potential.
They have a lot of power. They have a lot of power, but then there's not this requirement, that there's any kind of real representation at these annual meetings, right? Representation for the particularly vulnerable people that would be most affected by this, people, single parents, people on a fixed income, people with certain disabilities that make them homebound, things like that. Like,
It's
is wild.
definitely frustrating, but it's one of the few things that actually isn't really gray in in the statute. It's very clear, absolutely no absentee or proxy voting is allowed, which strange for state code to be so black and white.
Okay, next one. Can a lake district levy special assessments on properties within within Lake District in addition to the general Lake District levy. So, yes, there is the potential for a mill rate to be set. So basically everything is based off of a budget that is approved and projects approved as part of the annual meeting. The mill rate and special assessments, all those would be then decided in order to fund that budget. Now that certainly that can look at over a period of time where, maybe it's a project that's over several years that you want to fund it at a particular rate, but there could be a levy to support the projects and the budget. There could be special assessments for all or portions of the Lake District, and then also special charges and the power to finance. So there are limitations in some of those, from the levy and even to some degree, some of the special assessment on $2.5 per thousand. But when it comes to the power to finance and even potentially some of the special charges, which would be potentially developed to pay for some of the powers to finance, there may not be limitations. So there is some gray area in some of this that we certainly need to do a little more homework on. Likely involve, I've reached out to Nick already, Corp Counsel, on a few questions. This one will try to get a little guidance from him. One of the points that's made in the guidance document, and it says it several times, is that decisions that the district make should consult with an experienced attorney, law attorney for some of these things. So we may have answers and try to have answers for some of these decisions and questions right now, but certainly if the district is approved, there is a level of responsibility that district has in order to confirm those opinions and support those opinions. They may not be the same as what we have here at this present time, but that can happen at any point in the future. So,
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
Heather and Chase, so they're all on the same page. Could you kind of describe what special assessment might be, examples or whatever?
So the special assessments laid out in chapter 33, section 32, grants them the authority, and then it references another part of statutory code because that's fun. That statutory code that's referenced is chapter 66.0703. And that just generally lays out how special assessments are made. It lays out that you have to justify the properties are going to benefit that you're going to assess. So if you're going to charge 5 properties out of 700, you need to be able to say why you're charging those 5 and not the other 655. They need to go through and get bids and have a project outline and basically a whole slew of here's what it's going to cost, here's what we're doing. And then they need to do a number of public hearings. As far as eligible costs within code, it just says anything. So I can read it verbatim. The cost of any work or improvement to be paid in whole or in part by special assessment on property may include the direct and indirect cost, the resulting damages, the interest on bonds or notes issued in anticipation of the collection of the assessments, a reasonable charge for the service of administrative staff of the city, town, or village, and the cost of any architectural, engineering, and legal services, and any other item of direct or indirect cost that may reasonably be attributed to the proposed work or improvements. So basically anything, I super clear. As long as they can tie it to a specific project, they can charge for it, is kind of my reading.
So a special assessment then is usually assessed against a limited number of properties for a specific purpose, like a sidewalk in a city.
Right.
Is that?
I have some more comments on, yep. So
Yeah,
in the
go ahead.
guidance document, which then references statute 3332 as well as statute 60. So special assessments are typically used for larger capital projects. Special assessments may only be levied against benefited property. And the procedures for special assessments are quite complex, including required notices, reports, and public hearings. They may impose in a lump sum and may be made payable in up to 10 annual installments. Like with special charges, most districts certify special assessments to the local municipal treasurer for collection. So in special charges, they do list some examples. Special charges are typically used to pay for services that benefit individual properties, such as sewer or water service, aquatic plant harvesting, algae control, or garbage pickup. And then, it goes on to talk more about some of those details. But yes, it can be all, or it can be just particular to certain benefited properties.
Thank you.
There's one other comment I think that maybe is applicable here because it's under the special charges section in the guidance document. It says certain activities like aquatic plant harvesting provide both general community benefits and special benefits to specific property owners. In these cases, some lake districts finance these activities using a combination of general tax levy and a special charge on benefited properties. So this is where the terminology of special assessment, special charge, powers to finance, tax levy, all kind of start blending together. And then it's just a matter of how that's structured and the ability for that district to make those decisions. Complex.
Chase, has a question. If there was a lake district, would Dunn County Land and Water have an easier time getting grants if they both went together, or not necessarily?
That's a good question for Heather too. But go ahead, you started out.
So the typical grant programs that are that fund things like Lake Association project, Lake District projects, et cetera. Even Dunn County Land and Water has applied for some of these. It's called Surface Water Grant Program through the DNR. They have different caps and stuff like that, and typically you can only have one applicant. So Dunn County Land and Water could not co-apply with the Tainter Lake Rehab District. Now, that being said, all projects are graded on the same scale. Things like community interest, community involvement, stakeholders, consideration and stuff like that are considered part of the grading process. But a lake district, a county, a lake association, they are all graded on the exact same criteria. So there's no competitive advantage conferred to any particular unit of government over a strictly voluntary organization.
I just thought that if two of them went together, it could show more whatever to the state, and that might help on the grading of it.
Typically, how that would look is one of the organizations would be the applicant. So let's say Dunn County Land and Water is the formal applicant. We would be in charge of the administrative stuff. We would be, on the hook for all the stuff. Grants typically you need to have a certain percentage of what's called match, which is your own input. The state isn't going to pay for 100% of any given project. Match can come in the form of actual cash. It could also come in the form of volunteer labor. In the case of Dunn County Land and Water, it would likely mostly be donated professional services, which would be staff time, and stuff like that. Then the Lake District could, send a letter of formal support that would then get submitted with the application, which could then look more favorably to the DNR.
And the match could come from the Lake District membership or activities as well.
Correct. They can do volunteer labor, they can do bake sales, what have you.
They can do an assessment too, right?
Good. Okay, next question. What is the current average valuation within the proposed district? What is the current average tax levy? And what is the maximum increase to the average property within the proposed lake district? So Heather did some extensive work on this, working with our land information office to help pull some of that data. It's all here. Heather, if you want to pull out a couple figures, but there's a couple different sets of figures here based on the inclusion of properties that have zero valuation or zero assessment, such as municipally owned properties. Or I think in a couple of cases, there were some splits or something. Yeah,
I as Chase mentioned, I worked with land information, Rachel up there, And there were some properties that have been split recently that just haven't been assessed yet. I would hazard a guess that they're not going to actually be $0 assessments, but they haven't been assessed yet, so we don't have that data. So for right now, it is 0. In the interest of answering the question as completely as possible, I did some stuff where it was just a straight average of all parcels on the lake, and then one where I just removed all of the 0 values because most people pay more than $0 on the lake. And naturally, zeros are going to skew things downwards. So, but if there's any questions on that, I did the straight mean and the median just to kind of give an idea of what the range could look like.
So you can see in the report, based on those values with removal of the $0 assessed properties, maximum tax increase of average property would range from 489 per year to 549 per year. We'll get into a little bit of discussion later on here about what other counties, when I reached out to other counties and what their experiences are. They vary widely as to mill rates and what their average property tax increase would be. And some are fee based, and then in some cases, I think Waukesha County, for example, highly populated, high income area, their max mill rate on all their districts combined was 1.3. So it wasn't to the 2.5. Now statute allows to 2.5. So it's not to say that that can't happen, but from my communication with my counterparts in other counties right now, I have not seen one that has gone to that level. Now, with the exception of some districts decide to not do a mill rate and they do a fee. And those fees can be $500, so, whether that's more or less than what the 1.3 mill rate would be, or the closer to the 2.5. So hopefully these paragraphs here help answer some of those questions. I think Supervisor Barrier, you had some of those specific ones. So the next one, Kendall
Hey,
Lake.
excuse me.
Oh,
before
sorry.
you go on.
Yep.
So the 14 properties that the county owns, those would be 0 right now?
Those are
So-
0. Yep.
Would they be assessed then or valued at whatever and then? So how does that work?
So county property, municipal property wouldn't be able to be taxed at the general mill rate. The district would still be able to impose special assessments, special fees and stuff like that. But property that assesses at 0 isn't included in the general mill.
Okay, and so with this Lake District, they wouldn't be assessed at more than 0. They'd stay the same. Okay, thank you.
That's not to say that county land can't be taxed. That's not to say that the district can't come in and say, if it becomes a fee-based district, for instance, the county may be on the hook for a $500 annual fee if that's how they decided to administer their budget.
500 per property?
If that's how they chose to administer it.
Okay.
So in my communication with other counties, it's been a little bit mixed on that interpretation to some degree. Some municipalities have actually, when the district was formed, modified the boundaries to exclude all municipal land. That way there's no question about the potential for fees, charges, that sort of thing. There are other municipalities and counties that have county or municipal land within district boundaries, but it's just a general rule or a general exception that there's not going to be a special assessment or charge to those. Mainly, I think due to the fact of, it's a taxpayer funded entity already, and then to put another fee on top of that, who's paying that fee? It's going to be all taxpayers, and it's just a general rule that, and this is, I think, more the central Sands part or central Wisconsin part of the state that said it just doesn't happen. So we're a little cautious on that because the statute isn't quite clear. Certainly it's clear that the assessment would be zero, would remain zero, but as Heather mentioned, any special charges, it's unclear whether Dunn County would be subject to that in the future. And if so, that's something to consider.
Can I just do one last follow-up, Monica? So did you kind of say that some districts have more or less a handshake agreement with the county not to impose fees?
That's the way it was perceived by my communication.
Thank
Yep.
you.
So there could be that arrangement, but not necessarily, right? They would have to kind of just decide to be nice that way. So assuming that there isn't that, like, what kind of representation does the county have then at these annual meetings?
So on the Board of Commissioners, both the initial board and the permanent board, if you will, structure, this committee or the Land Conservation Committee, as it's spelled out in guidance and statute, has the authority to appoint a representation on the Board of Directors. So there would be a continuous representation in perpetuity as long as the district exists, for the county to have representation on there, as well as the majority evaluation of the town that has the majority of the property owners in the district. So the township, in this case, would be the town of Tanner, would also have representation on it.
So there's representation on the board, but then, like, at these annual meetings, like, property owners show up and, they vote. Like, is there a way for the county to represent itself that way as a voting member? And who would even that person be? Like,
I mean, if there's any supervisors that are on the lake.
Do they have to be a lake resident? It wasn't clear to me.
That is spelled out in some of the guidance here. Let me grab that quick. So voting, who can vote at the annual meeting? To vote at annual meetings of the Lake District, a voter must be a U.S. citizen over 18 years of age who is either an elector, a qualified voter who resides in the district. That's number one. Or two, an owner of property within the district, a person whose name appears as an owner of real property on the tax roll, a person who owns title in real property even through the person's name does not appear on the tax roll, so such as a spouse and then as well as a person who is the official representative, officer, or employee authorized to vote on behalf of a trust, foundation, corporation, association, or other organization owning real property in the district. So an elector, I guess, or an owner of property.
I guess I was referring to as our appointed representative. Do they have to be a resident of the lake?
You know that, right?
I don't believe so.
I don't think so either, but it does seem like the board is going to have a lot of power. The membership has a difficult time exercising their power, but the board does. So that appointment, if the district goes through, would be pretty important for us.
In code, there's nothing stating that the LCC member would have to be a resident of the Lake District.
They don't even have to be member of this committee. It could be
right.
Yeah, you could have somebody appointed. It would be either a member of the LCC committee or who is nominated by County Land Conservation Committee and appointed by the county board.
maybe later we can get into, how we would go about thinking about appointments and stuff, but go ahead. Thanks.
The next question was, can a lake district create ordinances or other laws? So the statute does talk about this to some degree. I think in answering this question, I may have had in my head when I think of ordinances, zoning ordinances, that sort of thing. Certainly shoreline zoning is still applicable, whether this district applies, or, is approved or not. The ability to create other ordinances on top of that, there is that potential from within lake regulation or water body regulations, such as boating regulations. So currently townships sometimes create no wake zones on lakes. The district does have that ability as well, but typically is funneled through the municipality, such as the town. So in a way, there is the ability to create ordinances, but not necessarily, I don't believe it's necessarily directly from the district themselves. It has to go through the municipality, such as the local town, for that approval. So there's a little more language in here. The statute calls out some specific areas in the state that some of this applies to. And the answer to that question is how we answered is the best we can come up with at this point in time. So. Another question here was, looking for more information on other lake districts and their collaboration with their respective counties, municipalities, DNR, et cetera. So I reached out to all 72 of my counterparts across the state. Been getting some feedback from likely the ones I expected, ones with the most lakes, lake coverage. At the time that we submitted this report, we had spoken to 5 of them. I've now spoken to 8. And of those 8, I would say that, so currently, just a little, some fun facts. The first lake organization in the state was in 1898. And now today there are more than 500 lake associations and there's 212 lake districts. So of my counterparts that I've spoken with so far, that's been 8 counties representing or have an affiliation with almost 83 districts in the state. Some of those are in lake country that, as we would think of, northern Wisconsin, and their relationship with those lake districts varies. Some perspectives from my counterparts is the county land and water conservation departments, county in general, is involved more in the early stages of a lake district getting its feet under itself. But with the expectation that within 2 to 3 years, a lake district is functioning solely on its own. The relationship with the county then, beyond the representation on the board of directors for the lake district, is typically a resource. So land and water conservation departments are a resource for those districts to help answer questions. Maybe it's partnerships on grant applications, things like that. But in virtually everyone that I've spoken with, no county is writing grants or putting staff time in to the function of a lake district. Again, counties are the resource to help provide information, but for example, a grant application that the lake district might want to pursue, county staff are not going to be the ones writing that grant application. They may ask us to review it, provide comments, answer some questions, but we're not going to be. I think the concern that obviously we have is workload, and are we going to be generating, needing more staff time to be contributing towards this? And certainly there may be some overlap, but I would hope that there's overlap. I would hope that there's communication between the proposed district and our office, but I don't foresee it being a common trend across the state where land and water conservation departments are actively administering lake districts.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Okay. So it is possible or likely that the soil health and other mitigation efforts that land and water conservation has been undertaking for a long time, the work of the farmer-led watersheds, et cetera, could be pursuing path A, and the Lake District could be pursuing path B, C, D, totally independently, without any kind of collaboration. I mean, one has to assume fairness, but, or even discussion. I mean, just completely separate mitigation efforts. And I guess I sort of have the same question about the DNR and the DNR's ongoing, if any, relationship to this proposed lake district.
Yeah, so that is correct, that they can be completely autonomous from any efforts that we currently undertaking, whether that's through land and water resource management plans that county board has approved, the state has approved for our functions, TMDLs, 9 key element plans for the watershed as a whole, that can be completely separate. Obviously, we would encourage cooperation and coordination of that. Heather, maybe you can speak to some of your experience with more on that, yeah.
Yeah, so for specific projects that they would be mandated to get, if they, let's say they do a large scale harvesting operation, they would still be required to get DNR permits and that sort of thing, but there's no obligation to work with us or DNR beyond the base permit level. Typically, there's usually some need for a formal plan that's been approved by their board. And in a lot of active management situations, so harvesting, chemical treatments, et cetera, the DNR typically wants some form of formal plan on the books with them before they'll grant permits, but that's not necessary or mandated per se. Permits get a little fuzzy. If it's a grant funded project, then they have to have a plan on file and it won't be granted. If it's not grant funded, gets a little bit more gray.
Mr. Chairman, just a follow up. So if the DNR thought a particular mitigation strategy, like dredging, let's just take dredging, thought it was not a very wise idea, the Lake District could just go right ahead anyway.
They would still need permits through the DNR. I believe that would fall under Chapter 30 of DNR regulations. And they would still need to have a plan of what they're going to do with the dredged material and stuff like that. But they probably could, as long as the DNR is willing to just give them the permit with the caveat of, you're not getting any money from us.
Right. Thank you.
The next question is related to the first as well, but more information on existing lake districts, including what they're doing and how these projects are funded. I think particularly there was a question talking about success and whether it's counties feel that their districts are successful, and that that's a difficult one to answer because the view of success can be different for many different districts. In my communication with my counterparts, some view success as they're following the statute. That's a successful district. There are some perspectives that, there are districts that are quite inactive where nothing really happens. Some of my counterparts felt like, in their opinion that isn't very successful. Like, there's not any action being taken. But basically, some of my counterparts said, do they have a plan? Are they actively engaged? Do they have active membership engaged? Is it an active board that does their homework? Are they following the statute? That's a successful district. It could be as simple as, harvesting, aquatic vegetation harvesting. That typically is the motivation behind a lot of formations from lake districts, is that management of vegetation within the lake. So whether big or small operations, if the district is actively doing something, that could be considered success. In this paragraph, we talk about some of those tax levy and mill rates and their ranges. That's where I mentioned the 1.3 earlier, and as well as general fees. So, I think it's going to vary widely and on the motivations and the involvement of membership within the Lake District. So, and I would expect that wanes with time, whether citizens or members of the district is comfortable with what the Lake District is doing, maybe participation wanes a little bit. If it's high dollar items and intense projects, then maybe that would generate more involvement. But certainly there are, in the eyes of my counterparts, successful lake districts in the state, and some that are just more active and some that are not. One of my counterparts, they operate some of the basically the dams that are on some of their lakes. So they have four districts. All of them are impoundments. They have dams, and the county is responsible for operation of those dams. So their involvement with the Lake District is probably more than others, because they operate the lake level. And when certainly that's a hot topic for a lot of members and citizens around a lake is what the level of that lake is. So the involvement from a land and water conservation department on that level is different than what a typical lake district from a grant application, weed management, that sort of thing, sediment control, stuff like that. So there's a number of attachments we felt were important with the report, and those have all been included. I guess at this point in time, if there are, what we will continue to do on our side as staff will be to get some clarity on some of these questions about one, particularly ordinance development. I've reached out to Nick about that already. Likely include a little more understanding on special assessment, special charge, and any limitations that may be imposed there based on statute. And then I'm going to continue to reach out to my counterparts that I haven't heard from yet to try to get any tidbits of information that would be applicable for here. But beyond that, I guess we'll request of you at this point any guidance or further follow-up that you feel is necessary.
Right.
I think I remember the application requesting that only residents be included in the voting. Was that a request they made?
Part of the petition, you
Yeah.
think?
Do we have a say in that? Whether residents or owners?
Well, I don't know that we as a county or you as a county board have that ability to weigh in on that. I think it would come down to the annual meeting. That seems to be what a lot of the guidance refers to is the importance of having that annual meeting. And that's where some of the most biggest decision-making can take place. So, I mean, even the statute and the guidance lays out when an annual meeting should occur. But if at that annual meeting, they choose to have it at a different time, that can happen too. So I think there's a lot of power that's held at that annual meeting where decisions like that would be made.
I think, I'm guessing you're referring to number 2 on their recommendations, where it says it should be further specified that members of the board must be residents of the Lake District, correct?
Yes.
With the exception of the member from the representative from the town of Tanger and the Land Conservation Committee or their representative, I believe that's already laid out in code. So if that were to be specified, I think the only people that would apply to outside of the base level representatives would be the LCC member and the town of Tanger member. So it might be a little redundant unless they are trying to say that even in those cases, the only board members and the only representatives from the town and county should be residents of the Lake District, which might be what they're trying to get at, but I can't speak to their intention on that.
Rather than just property owners.
Yeah. Or that they were asking us to assure that any appointments we made were only from people who are residents of the lake.
Right.
That's kind of how I possibly interpreted it when I read it.
Yeah. Well, and I suppose to Chase's point, they could be saying that they don't want somebody on their board who's a summer cabin landowner. They want somebody who that is their voting address. Could be what they're getting at.
So a question about the governance, and maybe you probably, this is probably spelled out and I just missed it, but how are, after the initial board is replaced, how are the board members elected? Is it an annual election at the annual meeting or?
If memory serves, they stagger them out to 2, 3, and 4-year terms, and then they're elected in a staggered fashion like
At
that
the meeting?
at the annual
I
meeting.
think it's 1, 2, and 3-year terms.
Right.
The max is 3 years. Yep. And they would be done at the annual.
And
meeting.
the county representative is appointed at the will of this committee, or it would be, yeah.
Yeah.
Any
Question, please?
Sure, yeah.
So when you're saying that a non-resident cannot be on the board, Wouldn't that be, you know, taxation without being representative?
That's what they're requesting on their recommendations. I don't believe that's what's in code.
Okay,
I believe in code, you just need to be a landowner. So if
Okay.
you have a weekend cabin, you can be on the board. If you live there full time, you can be on the board.
Specifically in the guidance, and it'd be statute 33.282, 3 members are elected from the residents or property owners within the district.
okay. And my other question is, it seems like the county has a lot of power before it is formed, but once it is approved, we have very little to say about it. Is that correct?
Correct. To a certain extent, the county has, the power of the county is front loaded because then you are handing it to them if you decide to grant
Okay.
it to them. So it's kind of a handoff of power.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Monica?
So there's a discrepancy between the number of board members that they're recommending. They're recommending 7, but then somewhere else you guys are saying 5 board members. Can you just talk about that difference and what that's about?
Yeah, I've got it right here. Yeah. So typical boards of commissioners are 5 members. The electors or resident voters and property owners at the annual meeting may choose to permanently increase the number of elected commissioners from 3 to 5 to provide for a 7-member board of commissioners. And then it goes on to say, although the law does not set forth a detailed procedure for approving the expansion to a 7-member board, it is a good idea to put the proposal in the form of a written resolution for consideration. So they mention 7 requesting here. The county board, if it approves the district, does not have the authority to say you're going to have 7. That decision is made at the annual meeting. Yep.
So maybe just a quick review of what our expectations are with regard to timeline. Based on what you said earlier in the report, we would need to be prepared to move this. The last date on which we could move this to the county board would be our first meeting in October, right?
I believe October 19th is
The board meeting.
Is the right.
So our first meeting would be, would this go to the executive committee first or straight to the board?
I believe this goes straight to the board.
Okay, so our first meeting in October would be the final point at which we would have to make a recommendation one way or the other. Okay. Does the committee feel comfortable with gathering information and sharing opinions for a while on this? Yeah, okay. Then that's what we'll do.
So just for clarity, then we'll continue to put this on the agenda.
Yep.
As it's listed right now. At any point in time between now and that first meeting in October, this committee can choose to act on that and forward the report on. Okay.
Okay, we're all understand where we are. Very good. Good report. Nice work, Heather. Both Chase. Yeah.
So we'll try to beef this up a little bit, answer a few more of those gray area questions, and then you'll likely see something different on the next committee agenda. I mean, it'll look very similar, but just with some added information. So.
Okay, great. Any announcements? Future meeting date, September 13th. With that, we're adjourned.